Neither war nor hostility is the reason that I'm not starting this one out with the peace greeting. But it is because when I explain this, many of you would forget that I even started with the peace greeting at all. There is a British man of South Asian ancestry, at least phenotypically, that in his car posted a video saying that wherever you are in trouble, look for a black woman. Media Man covered him, and I just got through telling Don Calypso that I hadn't seen that video yet, but shout out to Don Calypso for sending it and sharing it. I went ahead and watched it just now, within a few minutes of saying I didn't watch this video yet. This man put out another video before, I believe it was him, in which he said that as a Muslim, he would not have had the confidence to be outwardly and outspokenly Muslim if it were not for African American Muslims and some other black Muslims. He didn't specify the nationalities. He said that Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali gave guys like him the confidence, even though their heyday was before his birth. And that man is certainly younger than me. He may be half my age. He said, wherever a black woman is in the world, she knows you're in trouble, she'll help you. And that his mom was not a pick-me. All she had was female friends. So now he said that he was built up. And I'm going to be honest with you. There was a time when I was younger that I knew this side of black women. There was a time even before I came here that the black women in my hometown did this. They looked out for me. They backed me up. And this is at a time when the black women in Atlanta were already beginning to show some viciousness. And 2010, from 2010 to about 2012, I'd say, even into 2013, in my hometown, because it was somewhat conservative, the black women didn't walk around with this notion that don't help no black man. But by the same token, when I was in Atlanta, I began to see this develop, and it was rather sudden when in 2009 was when I really saw it. And it took a white female professor of mine to tell me why these teachers at a high school where I was doing practicum teaching were so against me. And she said, I've seen this before and I know what this is. Both of them are not only single moms, but they're single grandmoms. And frankly, single black moms and grandmoms just don't have a favorable view of black men. And you don't let people think you're not black. And so therefore, sorry about that, I only get phone calls when I'm recording. And so therefore, they came to me and when I was looking for a job in my hometown, and while they sort of set me up in an interview that I didn't expect, or they didn't tell me, I still came prepared for it. They were not trying to just disqualify me. But then by the same token, something else happened too. And I had to admit this. This man was not lying that sat in his car and said what he said. I have seen that there are times when sisters will do something for men that are not black that they will not do for black men. Now, when I was a little kid, they would do things for me at times and help me out. So I really didn't have this notion of black women being just ready to fight me and harm me. I didn't have this notion of them being willing to do that to me per se. But when I saw that they were willing to do this to some other brothers, I really thought that they believed that these other brothers were problematic. But then later on, I began to realize that with their sexual awakening, they began to view me differently. But That was when there were things they were willing to do for some of the men they would not do for me. But most of those things were intimate. However, they would sometimes try to stand up for me, and I didn't even know this was going on. Sometimes I did not know, other times I did. And at first, I thought, well, they realize that I'm not trying to start anything with anybody. So if someone else tries to start something, they say, no, you don't go after someone like that. That's what I thought at first. And then the second thing I thought was, well, they realize, or they see me as being, they figure, well, he doesn't have to stand up for himself because he's not starting anything with anybody. And then later on, I began to realize that they felt I could not stand up for myself. And that was when I began to go ahead and just start hauling off and hitting guys that got out of pocket. I started to just say, I'm going to go ahead and slug this ninja. He said something to me he wouldn't have said to somebody else. I'm going to get in his face. The minute he bucks, I'm going to uppercut him. Got into 3 fights in 1 year. Things began to change. But I myself misread why they were taken up for me at times. And when I got to Atlanta, of course, things were a little different. Of course, in Atlanta, they were much more bitter than they were anywhere else. They were so bitter in Atlanta, even when I first got there, middle 90s. The bitterness was insane. They believed that a single man in Atlanta was just defective and flawed and something was seriously wrong with him. Why else would he be single in Atlanta? That was the notion that they had. So then a lot of them would start to say, well, I'd rather a man that's married or engaged or something. You got to steal another girl's man, because if he ain't got a chick, he ain't no man. I began to hear this crazy way of thinking. It was an eye opener for me. And a few years later, I began to realize that they were pretty much just willing to do brothers in. So in all honesty, this antipathy and lowballing contempt that they had for brothers, I first really started to see in Atlanta. Atlanta is where it made a jump. It was always in these bad neighborhoods to a certain extent. But Atlanta is where it made the jump into the middle class. And from there spread. Other cities may have had the same thing happen, and I don't know about it. But when that man sat up there and said in his car, this non-black man sat in his car and said what he said, I believe that he meant it. I don't think that man was lying. These women will do things for these men they wouldn't do for brothers. There was a time they would do things for me. I was much younger and didn't know what I was looking at, but there was a time they would do things for me they wouldn't do for other brothers, as I just stated. And as I got older and more racially aware and less willing to let people think I was anything else, the less they were willing to do in my case. But I'm telling you now, that man was not lying. It may not have been a compliment, but he meant it as one, and he wasn't lying. That man was telling the actual observation he observed. We've seen it with our own eyes. You take a man that looks like him, and if you're nice to him, he's nice to you. So black women will be nice to him to see, and he'll be nice back to them. And they'll say, wow, a man that looks like this is being nice to me. Okay, so then they'll do anything for him. He wasn't making it up. There's nothing dishonest about what he said. I don't want you all to take away that notion. Sometimes I've seen women being willing to do this for some other brothers, growing up Gulf Coast, where you do have a few ambiguous looking brothers. I've seen some of them willing to do things like that for some of these ambiguous looking brothers. Now, getting into the late 90s, those brothers had to be within an ambiguity threshold, or they had to have some muscles to compensate. Now, that was also there, but you could go into some of the prairie Creole strongholds, and the Creole women there would still do just about anything for a guy that looked like that. I'm talking about black men that look like him. There was that. But you got to understand, no, man, you got to realize that, no, these guys, when they look like him and they say that, they're not lying. We're the ones they're not going to fight for. We're the ones they're going to look at and say, what did you do? You earned this. I mean, we got to a point where they were starting to do that to me. The older I got, the more they were willing to do the same thing to me. And now we see, when I go back to my hometown, I do see that it's not quite as bad as what it is in Atlanta. And what a lot of you were saying on social media, I do see that. But I have to admit that, no, man, when I'm in these larger cities, I see that attitude. And even towards me when I speak, their inward alert goes off. And then you take some model-looking non-black man, and he's not going to be mean, and his mom told him something that probably was the case back then, and this man's going to tell what his observation is. He's not just trying to pander per se. That man believes it because it's true for him. There was a time it was true for me. And once I got old enough to know what I was looking at, it quickly changed and became the opposite. And then later on, by the time I left, by the time I left my hometown, it was already starting to be the opposite, even in my hometown. It's like they wouldn't let anybody else mess with me per se, most of the time, but they turn around and do it. The other thing too is, it's like they wouldn't let somebody, they would say, well, leave black alone. He ain't done nothing to you. And the dude would be joking. We'd just be playing around. I'd be like, well, he's not serious. He and I are teasing each other. Thank you. I appreciate that. No, he and I are teasing each other. We get along okay. Oh. But then the problem would be that they couldn't imagine that I was really just teasing somebody and they were really just teasing me. And it wasn't that they were picking on me. They couldn't imagine that it wasn't the case. So even then, they couldn't see me as actually being strong enough to stand up to a black male. And that's what they see in this dude. They're like, well, he may not be just witty enough to do it, but he's not going to have to anyway. We're going to see to that because this ain't no fair fight. They're willing to fight battles for these guys. Understand this. Serena Williams, not just because of her athletic abilities, does not demand that Alexis or Alex Ohanian fight for her. That's not the only reason. He ain't got to. You would. If she chose to marry one of us Negroes, we'd have had to wait till marriage. She'd have been stingy with the puss after that anyway. We would have had to do all the protecting and the providing, and she still would have been stingy with the puss. I mean, hell, she pretty much realized, you know what, even if I did marry one of these Negroes, I'd cheat on him. Probably would have wired, so I might as well go ahead and get this wired, and he ain't got to wait till marriage. Got married while pregnant. What does that tell you? That tells you that her decision to abstain before marriage was not based on chastity. It was based on you being a Negro. She's just a famous example of that. But we know someone like that. And some people we know, and we can tell they're like that. We just don't see the proof. Or we couldn't prove it to anybody else, even if we've seen the proof. But we know someone like that. We know women that are like that for reasons that aren't necessarily racial. Oh, I'm a good girl, but he's a thug. He can get it in the back seat. I'm a good girl, but I'm going to say no, but he's an entertainer and he wants me to be one of his groupies. We know someone like that. She was just that way about both money and class. Money and race, mostly about race, because she still got more than him. She's a famous example of that. If somebody came to pick on him, she'd be out there about to fight. And I've seen this before. I'm aggressive and I'm masculine and I'm mean, but I'm going to fight this man's battle for him because he ain't one of us. That's how much I want him. Don't call that man a liar. Even if what he said wasn't a compliment, he thinks that it is. He meant it as one. That man ain't lying. No, he's not. Now, someone said, well, does he date black? Someone in the comment section was asking, does he date black women? He's Muslim. If he dates anybody, it better be his wife. He's got his face on TV. He done identified himself as a Muslim. If he does date, he knows we're coming after him. Like openly date without a marriage. If he does that, he knows we're going to say something. Black men that are Muslim, no matter what the race is of the woman that he's dating, and ain't no marriage. If he likes her, they can discuss marriage. She likes him back, then he can meet her family. That's how they do this. That's how we do this. If he just dating sisters, that's a problem. If he's just dating, that's a problem. It doesn't matter what the race is. If the women of his race, white, black, or race that we don't even know exists, that doesn't matter. And he ain't supposed to be dating a woman that ain't Muslim, no way. But that man's not lying. Oh no, I've seen that. And I am black. Maybe just not enough. So imagine if you actually come from another background that's not black, or it's like semi-black, but nobody considers it such, like his, something like that. A background that's white adjacent enough to where these sisters will feel like they done stepped up away from you. Even if that's not true, just imagine that. Well, there you go. That's what he represents. And so therefore, they'll fight for him. It's true. They will do things for him they would not do for a child with a wide nose and big lips and 4C hair. I hope this helps and answers everything. Before I thank everybody, I want to specifically thank S. Jock and M. Green for coming through on Cash App, especially S. Jock, based on both amount and frequency. But I do appreciate them both for coming through on the Cash App. And if you go to buy me a coffee, I would recommend, if you're going to buy a coffee for me, I recommend you go ahead and subscribe because the cost is the same. And in this way, you'll get access to some things that only members get. I got 2 classes now, two memberships. So for the same as just buying me a coffee, you can join the business class, or for twice that much, 10, you can join the first class and see even more stuff. Many things. There are many things that I will show that are available for both to view in the beginning, and then after about a day and a half, about 36 hours, then it'll be available to the first class viewers. And then there are things that even the business class can see. There are things that anybody who's ever made a donation one time can see, but there are going to be more things that the business class can see, and even more that the first class can see moving forward. We got 16 confessions now. 12 sermons in a sentence, and more insight into what it's like living here, not visiting. Thank you all for listening. As always, black heart, black mind, black out. Black heterosexual, non-select male power, because they don't like it, and black patriarch until extinction of judgment day. Thank you for flying with us again here on Jet Black Air, where the phrase jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us till the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender justice forever.